Okay, so welcome to the Committee of Adjustment meeting. This is May 1st. First off, we acknowledge the municipality of Strathroy-Caradoc acknowledges that it's located on Treaty 21 territory. We're thankful to the generations of people who've taken care of this land, including the Chippewas of the Thames First Nation, the Munsee Delaware First Nation, and the United Nation of the Thames. Sajja, I'm going to go to you for a roll call.
Thank you, Chair. My name is Sajal Osman, and I'm the Acting Secretary-Treasurer for the Committee of Adjustment today. I will be hosting the meeting and managing participants. Committee members joining us this evening include Councillor Kennis, Member Kumar, Member Vian, Councillor Pelkman, Deputy Mayor McGuire, Councillor Derbyshire, and Member Terpstra, who is also our Chair. Municipal staff in attendance this evening are Tim Williams, Manager of Planning with the County of Middlesex, Alyssa Soldo, Planner with the County of Middlesex, Jake DeRitter, Senior Development Coordinator, Rob Lilborn, which is our Director, and Melanie from the Legal Legislative Services team. Tonight we have 6 applications to be heard by the committee. The Chair will introduce each application and provide the applicant and agent an opportunity to speak to the application. The planner will follow with the report. The public will then be invited to make comments or ask questions about the application. The Chair will then call upon the committee to ask questions and make comments before the Chair calls for a vote on the application. Once a decision is made, there's a 20-day appeal period from the date of decision for minor variances and 20 days from date of notice of decision for consent. If anyone wishes to be notified of the decision, you can make a request today or make a written request following this meeting. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. First off, we need an approval of the agenda, a recommendation to be approved as circulated. Frank, seconded by Dale. All in favor? That carries. Declaration of pecuniary interest by anyone on the committee? Seeing none. The reading and correction of the approval of minutes. You've circulated minutes, you've seen those. Looking for a recommendation for approval of those. Randy, second by Dale. All in favor? And that carries. So our submissions for consideration tonight. First is application 5.1, application for consent B3 2025, 56 Cayman Street. Owner is Prowler Holdings Inc. Is anyone from Prowler Holdings here today?
We are.
Yep. Hi, welcome. So I'd like to go first to the report. Alyssa, you're on.
Thank you, Chair. This application before committee tonight is to convey a portion of the subject lands at 56 Cannon Street for the purposes of merging it with the adjacent lands at 70 Cannon Street through a consent for lot addition. The effect of the application would to be accommodate a building addition on 70 Cannon Street, which has been built over the current property line. The subject property is located on the south side of Cannon Street, east of Caradoc Street South. The entirety of the property is regulated by the St. Clair Region Conservation Authority. The subject lands as a whole is approximately 3.54 acres in size, containing warehouses, self-storage buildings, and a stone storage barn. The lands to be conveyed are approximately 238 square meters in size, containing a portion of the building expansion from the structure located at 70 Cannon Street. This lot addition will ensure that the building is fully located within its own property boundaries and meet zoning setbacks. The retained lands at 56 Cannon Street will then be approximately 3.47 acres in size, and the lands at 70 Cannon Street with the addition will be approximately 1.2 acres in size. No comments were provided by the public prior to the development of this report. Provided agency comments include the Senior Development Coordinator requesting a condition be added for land dedication across the frontage of the property on Cannon Street, and the St. Clair Region Conservation Authority has no concerns. The Provincial Planning Statement, Middlesex County Official Plan, and Strathroy-Caradoc Official Plan and Zoning Bylaw all permit minor boundary adjustments, and the lots created will not further irregularize the shapes of the lot. No further deficiencies will be created through this process, and given the above and within the report, I am recommending approval of consent application B3 2025 subject to the conditions provided in the report. Thank you.
And there are a lot of conditions. Anything to add by the owners of the property?
I don't think so.
No? And you were good with all those conditions? Then I'm going to go to committee members for any questions, concerns. Mike?
Yeah, it's clearly done. Just to correct a slight error when things were made, so I'll move the motion that the applicant for the consent B3-2025 be approved with the conditions provided by staff.
Okay, looking for a seconder for that. Steve, all in favor? And that carries. Thank you. So our next one is application for consent 5.2 B4 2025. It's 22706 and 22710 Adelaide Road, County Road 81, Mount Bridges. Owners are Paul Milliken, Doug Milliken, and David Milliken. And are any of the Millikens here? No, I don't think so. Okay, then Melissa, I'll go to you for a report.
Thank you, Chair. This application before a committee is to sever an existing semi-detached dwelling through the creation of a new residential lot. The subject property is located on the north side of Adelaide Road between Woods Edge Road and Falcon Bridge Road. The property as a whole is approximately 0.86 hectares with 37.18 meters of frontage along Adelaide Road. The lot to be severed is approximately 414 square meters with 10.7 meters of frontage, containing 1/2 of the existing semi-detached dwelling. The retained lot is approximately 2.01 acres with 26.4 meters of frontage, containing the other half of the existing semi-detached dwelling, as well as existing accessory buildings. This application was previously brought forward to committee on October 7, 2021, and was conditionally approved. The timeline to complete conditions has lapsed. Therefore, this application is the exact same request, which was originally provided to allow for 2 additional years to complete the conditions that are remaining. No comments were provided by the public prior to the development of this report. Provided agency comments include the Middlesex County Engineer providing road dedication requirements, and Bridge Gas previously advised of service lines in the area. The Manager of Environmental Services previously advised about private services being wholly located on their own lots. The Director of Planning and Building previously advised the application's alignment with attainable housing provisions in the strategic plan. And Middlesex County Emergency Services provided comments regarding municipal 911 addressing. The Provincial Planning Statement, Middlesex County Official Plan, Strathroy-Caradoc Official Plan and Zoning Bylaw all permit the consent application with the proposed use of the property. No rezoning would be required for either the lot to be severed or retained. And given the above, I am recommending approval of consent application B4 2025, subject to the conditions provided in the report. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Melissa. Then I'll go back to committee members. Any questions or concerns?
I have one.
Yes, sure, Mike.
Thank you, Chair. So question to staff. Do we know why they were unable to satisfy the original consent application? And my question revolves around the fact that I know there was some conversation between the landowner and the municipality over the last couple of years about kind of an outstanding issue on that property that they were trying to resolve with the municipality, which I understand has now been resolved. Do you have any comment to that?
Yes, through the chair. So the original application lapsed because they didn't satisfy any of the conditions. They had maybe done a reference plan and a few other little things, but there was quite a list of outstanding conditions still. The owners did take issue with the parkland dedication. That was kind of one of the bigger ones, but the committee waived that condition back in December. And then, yeah, like you said, all the other sort of issues with this property have been sorted out. But it was just simply they just didn't satisfy the condition.
So I guess my concern is this a situation that would warrant a consideration of waiving of the fee for this application because of continued discussions between the municipality and the property owner, which ultimately came to a resolution and now they want to move forward? I guess that if that makes sense as to my concern.
So the committee already waived the application fee back in December as well. So there's no fee with this tonight.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions?
None, but I'll move the motion
To move the motion.
as presented by staff, yes.
Seconded, Steve. All in favor? And that carries. 5.3 is an application for minor variance A3 2025. This is at 24640 Melbourne Road, County Road 9. Owners Pamela Margaret Burdick and Paul Cody Vandercroft, and I believe they're in the audience. Yes, and we've seen this last month, I believe. Okay, so Alyssa, I'll go to you first for your report.
Through the chair, I'm just going to start with a quick introduction and then move to Alyssa's report, and she will present that as would be a normal process. You are correct. I'm going to start right there with the background. In March, this did come forward to the Committee of Adjustment, and at that time, the committee deferred the application with a request for discussions to occur with planning staff. It looked like what might happen here is that it would go for a rezoning application, and that may be the direction that it would go. And so I had a conversation with the applicants, owners of the property, and we discussed in that phone call conversation ways that the application may be adjusted in order to meet some of the policy requirements moving forward. So, and just to speak to those policy requirements, this is an agricultural property. Members will have read the reports, and you can see the location map and probably be tweaked to what we're talking about here, but it is a second dwelling on an agricultural property. And there are a few different ways that can happen, whether it be a temporary foreign worker housing, or a garden suite, or a temporary home on a property where people are looking for up to 3 years. They could have a additional home be built, and then they would remove that first home. This was a different situation. It was a unique situation that didn't quite fit into each one of those positions, so it would need something special. And so we were discussing how that would look, what that would look like through a rezoning process. And we came to a point where I discussed that I thought it would be supportable at a rezoning stage by doing some renovation to the existing dwelling and just clarifying the location of the future dwelling. But the Committee of Adjustment application is still open, right? And so the discussion then went to the possibility of coming back to committee. And so I discussed with them having a conversation with Alyssa about the changes that were made, and let her sort of review that and get back to them to let them know where sort of Alyssa stood. And so, spoiler alert, you have the report in front of you. You know that it recommends denial, but at that same time, the application fees are paid, the application is open. Why not bring it back to committee? Now, there is a difference between the criteria that are necessary for a minor variance, which that's why staff are recommending a refusal denial on this application. Whereas if this were to go forward as a rezoning, that's a different bar, and the tests are different for a minor variance versus the rezoning. And so I just want you to understand that the applicants have spent some time between the last time they were here and now looking at ways to adjust the application. They understand sort of some of the boundaries, where things fit into the larger picture, where if it were to go for rezoning, what that would look like, and the support level, but knowing that they have this application, want to deal with this in this form. So I will leave it at that. If at the end there's questions for either of us, I'm certainly open to that, but Alyssa will take you through the application as it stands. Thanks.
Thanks, Tim.
The minor variance application before committee is seeking relief from section 4.65B of the zoning bylaw to permit a secondary suite on the ground floor of an accessory building that is 139.4 square meters in size, or 98.4% of the gross floor area of the primary dwelling. whereas the bylaw restricts secondary suites to a maximum of 75 square meters or 40% of the gross floor area of the primary dwelling and must be located above the main floor. As noted, this application has been revised from what was originally noted, whereas the existing dwelling is considered the primary and the applicants are proposing to add a 25 square foot addition to the existing house, which would make it about 1525 square feet, and the proposed secondary suite is 1500 square feet. The subject property is located at the southeast corner of Melbourne Road and Calvert Drive in Strathroy-Caradoc. The lands contain a one-story single detached dwelling, a steel frame garage, a steel frame barn, and multiple greenhouses, and the owners run a propagation garden center from this property. No comments were provided by the public prior to the development of this report. Provided agency comments include the Senior Development Coordinator having concerns with the proximity to the existing dwelling and potential agricultural land impacts. The Middlesex County Engineer advised of no comments, and the St. Clair Region Conservation Authority has also advised of no concerns. I have reviewed the application against the 4 tests of the Planning Act, and as indicated in the report, it is staff's opinion that this application does not meet all 4 tests. A 98.4% gross floor area is drastically above the 40% secondary suite size limit, therefore this cannot be considered minor. The proposal is inconsistent in size with similar secondary suites within accessory buildings, and with the revised location of the secondary suite being clustered within 30 meters of the farm buildings and behind the main dwelling, this does reduce some concerns compared to the previous application. And while these positive changes have been made, the application does not meet all 4 tests, and as such I am recommending denial of the minor variance application A3-2025. Thank you.
Thank you, Alyssa. Now we're going to go back to the owners of the property. Do you have anything you would like to add at this time?
Yes, please.
Could you please come up to the microphone?
Oh, sorry.
And just state your name and confirm for a minute.
Hello, I'm Cody Vandercroft, my wife, Pamela Burdick. So we're here looking to keep our house for our parents, aging parents, and well, we'd like to be able to take care of them in the future. And as far as the size of the dwelling goes, it's going to be set far back on the property. The only place anybody's going to would be able to tell that it's larger or smaller than the other home would be coming from Melbourne Road. They would have like a very quick glimpse of the house. There's 2 acres of willow trees in front of it. Nobody would ever be able to tell the size of either place. So we feel that it is in keeping with the look of the rural view for people.
If we are forced to remove our existing house, that land will not go to farmland because it's too small. It's only about 1/3 of an acre. And we have a tenant who rents our land already, who's rented before we even own the property. And he says 1/3 of an acre is too small to farm, so it's just gonna be a lawn. On top of it, where we're going to be building the new house, it has higher elevation, so therefore we can have a finished basement. Majority of our property is quite wet, closer to the existing house, and we believe in building up and not out. So this is how we can have a finished basement, is in that area. Plus, it's also blown sand, so it doesn't, very few items grow there. The tenant who rents our land, he says that that area is not good for his cash crops, so it's not good farmland at that area. And
then as far as severance go in the future, if they're worried about that, we don't want to, we never would sever off any of the land. We want to live there until we retire, as long as we can. And right now, you can't sever off any property off of a smaller than 40-hectare piece of land as it sits. So.
And our parents have really expressed a desire to live in the house, be closer to us. They want to have their independence, and they don't want to be a burden, but at the same time, they do need a lot of help. And so this would be a great way for us to help them out.
Okay, thank you for that. So I'm gonna go to committee members for any questions, concerns, or comments. Yes, Brian?
Thank you. So we all talk about how we need more housing and we need to build more houses and we should build more houses, and you're gonna see later in today where we're building houses in backyards in residential areas. Here's a 40-acre farm. This isn't gonna bug anybody. The neighbors aren't here complaining that, you know, you're putting a house behind my house. I do agree it is not prime agricultural land. That is not good farmland. Nothing against your dirt, but we own a whole bunch of it ourselves. I understand that, you know, when we look at this, maybe it doesn't particularly meet, you know, the rules that come with this, but in looking at what the goal is to build another residence, whether we're calling it a secondary suite or now it's gonna be bigger and it's gonna be the primary suite. The goal is to have more housing, which is what this is actually doing. It is creating more housing. It will open up the second house. So I feel like we need to begin to look more and more at this happening outside of just our urban areas. You know, the rural area, we do want to protect farmland, but we still need to work with people and try to make it, you know, an easier kind of way to go about this. If it's up to me, I'm in support of them building their house, and if that means they change a bylaw where, you know, that this becomes primary residence and the smaller one is a secondary, whether that's an option or anything like that, how we can figure out how to work within the rules and put this together.
Okay, thank you for that. Any other committee members? Frank?
I guess my concern is precedent setting things, and I just perhaps Tim can talk more about the alternative, the rezoning, where I assume that this would be like a temporary arrangement, or maybe permanent, I don't know, but my personal preference would be, and I understand what wants to be, or what the applicants are asking to happen. I would just prefer it if we could do it within the fence we have to work within, I guess, if that makes sense. So I appreciate any comments there.
So, through the chair, to member Dennis. So it is a unique situation. There are secondary suites that have gone forward to council rather than to the Committee of Adjustment, and those members of council will remember that particular application on Longwoods. For those that are just members of committee, and when I say just, I don't mean that in any negative or lesser manner, but in that particular application, it was a situation where the two dwellings were, the existing dwelling was much smaller than the proposed dwelling, and so it needed to be an application for rezoning versus a minor variance. It was even more than here, but what we have here is something that's just slightly, well, they're close together. I'll say similar in size, but the proposal is for the secondary, the new dwelling to be slightly smaller technically than the existing dwelling. It does come, it is a difficult situation, but members of committee know that there isn't a specific number when it comes to a minor variance versus not a minor variance, and that's where we have professional planning opinions that come forward to you, but ultimately it is a decision that's made by the committee reviewing it that way. It isn't simply just a putting forward of staff's comments and a decision made on that basis. I can say more potentially if you want, but that's where I would leave it for right now.
Okay, thanks, Tim. Now I'll go to Steve.
Yes, thank you. I I understand why the recommendations are the way they are, and that's the way the rules need to be applied, but I always try to look at it from a practical lens about what works and what doesn't work. And so bits of the recommendations, I think the rules just need to change, like the can't be on the ground floor rule, I think needs to be changed. And probably in the rural areas, the square footage things need to be changed. The only issue that I have with this application is the proposed location of the second house, which effectively slices the property in half, because you're gonna have to have a driveway to it. And then to me, it becomes two farmable pieces of property as opposed to one that wraps around the nursery functionality of it. But as far as the rest of it, I'm somewhat okay with going against recommendations from a practicality standpoint. That, you know, it'd be nicer if it could happen within the building envelope rather than on the open farmland. Then I wouldn't have any issue with it at all. But that's the only issue I have with it, is that the new house is going in the open farmland.
Okay, thanks, Steve. I'll go to Mike, and then I'll come back.
Thank you. I have a couple statements. I did attend an out at the property because it's one of these ones I wanted to put my eyes on to really understand what was going on, and I did have a brief conversation with the applicants as they just walked me around their property. So that made me understand why the building envelope is where it is, because they were able to walk me through the property, and I kind of had that aha moment. This now makes sense to me. But on the four questions, and first of all, I will say that I believe the report is accurate and properly written, and I have no qualms with what staff have said or done in the report at all. However, I will say that the rules under which the Committee of Adjustment and the four tests were written was during a time when the PPS stood for the Provincial Policy Statement. And in the last year, or 18 months, it's now changed to the Provincial Planning Statement. So it's being looked at differently by the province. We know that, right, through intensification. And that's, I think, why we're seeing so many challenging issues at this table, where it's hard for us to understand, and perhaps we need to, you know, take a step back and understand what is going on. You know, so on the first test, is it minor? And I completely understand why staff would come up with no, because we've always talked numerically at this point in time. Is it minor? Do we compare two numbers and say it's minor or it's not minor? But I think we could say that this is minor when given the concept of the Provincial Planning Statement and the fact that we have to look at new sources of residences and new opportunities and new ways to use land. So I don't think it necessarily has to be numerically, and I think we can challenge ourselves to look outside that box. You know, again, you know, is the variance an appropriate use of the land? Of course, staff are challenged, and they must write the report according to those black and white rules of the regulations. But we get to take a broader view of that, and I would challenge ourselves again to look at it and say, is it appropriate given the land? When I went out and walked the land and took a look around at the land, I came up with the idea that yes, it is appropriate. Given the total circumstances, I believe it is an appropriate use. You know, in number 3, we have an agreement that it does maintain the official intent of the, or does the variance maintain the intent of the official plan? And the answer there is yes, which really leads to what I just said. The official plan, even though our official plan is dated and hasn't been updated since the PPS changed from a policy statement to a planning statement. It does, and that's kind of a really big, broad statement we're making in number 3. That's that big overarching statement. And then in number 4, does it maintain the intent of the zoning bylaw? And again, the zoning bylaw predates the PPS as a planning statement. So again, I challenge myself to really step back and look at what truly is the intent of the bylaw in today's world compared to when it was written. Overall, it's challenging. I know if we approve it, it will probably, I can almost say guaranteed, it'll be appealed at the county level because that's how the process works. Whether or not it ever makes it to county council is a whole nother situation, but I think it will put another set of eyes on it, and I think that's good because I think we really need to start challenging ourselves to re-look at what we're doing with land and how we're doing it. So I'll just leave it there because I don't want to interrupt any other conversation that might unfold. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mike. We're gonna go back to Cody.
I'd just like to state that, yes, the house, to your point, kind of makes it like 2 farms. It doesn't, in the sense, you can't sever it. It never could be. And they are, in a sense, 2 different types of farmland. One is very wet, the other side is much more usable for renting land, cash crops, etc.
And we're not touching that land, it's staying for cash crops.
And that stays. And then as far as having 2 homes on and our housing shortage, that is one issue. The other part is that, say in the future or already now, farmers are having trouble with their kids being able to buy a house, whatever, buy into the family business. Well, here's a house, you know, we're able to make a living there. If we had children, would they not be able to live in the house and have a true family-run operation there? Yes, you could. So I don't see how that is really hurting the look, the feel of the country to you.
Okay, thank you.
And just to note where the driveway is gonna be along the neighbors, and then when you get past the neighbor's property, that's a septic bed there, so you can't farm on that land anyways.
Okay, thank you. Okay, back to committee member Frank.
I guess just a question then in general, not necessarily to do with this application, but are we in a situation now where any farm that's, I guess, is a zoned A1 farm that has a residence on it, they could add a second house on a farm? Yeah.
Would you mind just repeating the last part of it so that I?
So I guess any A1 farm that exists today that has a residence on it, they can add a second, or could apply to add a second residence to it, and we're pretty much, if we go ahead with this, we're pretty much obligated to allow that, or maybe it'd be appealed at the county, but yeah. Again, I'm not necessarily, let me be clear here, I'm not opposed to this one, but I'm just, are we going down a path where we're gonna see more of these, and we're in a position where we've done it here, so we need to do it everywhere else as well, so.
I'll start, and if Alyssa wants to add in. You know, the easy legal answer, if I was a lawyer, but I'm not, so thankfully I can just speak freely, is that a committee of adjustment decision is not precedent setting, and there's case law surrounding that. So we could say that, but reality of the situation is that people are going to see an application that's made by the committee and go, well, I would probably get something similar. So that's possible. But there's another piece to this that I think is helpful, is just as Member McGuire was mentioning, that the provincial planning statement has changed. And that's why in this report, there's a whole section, almost a page worth of material on the planning statement that you wouldn't normally see in an application. We don't normally put that much in there because it's talking specifically about tests for secondary dwellings on the property. And because our official plan, the Strathroy-Caradoc official plan, I should be clear, doesn't have those same criteria in it. Why? Because that official plan amendment number 14 was appealed and is still sitting with the Ontario Land Tribunal. We could pull something from it, but then it doesn't have the same legal bound. So we have to work with what we've got, which is the existing official plan. And as noted in the report, it does meet the intent of the official plan, which is to have secondary dwellings on agricultural properties or even rural, or urban properties as well. That is a permission. The tricky part of that permission is that it's above the garage. And why was that put in the first place? To try to eliminate the possibility of a future severance. So you don't have two dwellings on a property and then it just, oh, okay, now we're gonna take that apart. The garage is supposed to be attached to the primary dwelling on the property, and then this secondary suite is supposed to be associated with it to eliminate that possibility of the future consent application. The PPS goes forward and actually says lots with additional residential units may only be severed in accordance with the surplus farm dwelling severance requirements that you know. It has the policy number. I'm just converting the policy number into the actual so you can know that part. But that, I think, is the part that's important here, is that we didn't have that support before in the planning statement. We do now. Now that allows us to be a little bit more flexible in terms of allowing them on the first floor or on the first and second floor. And I don't believe that Alyssa has taken issue with that part of the minor variance application, this bringing it to the main floor. And I believe you've seen that a number of times already. I reviewed a number of those reports. And so I don't know that particular part is at issue. The part that I think the policy statement has been trying to move forward, the planning statement has been trying to move forward, is that there is a need for housing, that housing needs to be affordable, and how do we create a policy that allows for additional dwelling units, meaning smaller than what's already on the properties, to be tapped into. So you don't have to buy a new land in order to make this happen, but you can get an additional home on a property. Houses are, I shouldn't use quotes because it can't be heard the same way, but quote unquote, housing existing right now is too expensive, and so we need to find dwellings. We need to create policy and create incentives for housing that would be cheaper than what we already have, not more expensive per se. But with that being said, what we're dealing with here is a home that's existing on the property that's approximately 1,500 square feet. So it's not a monster home or something like that. It's a totally different part, but that's the provincial planning statement thinking about the entire province. I've gone a little bit further. This is turning into a little bit more like a teaching moment, but hopefully I'm helping round out the conversation for this particular application and maybe future applications that come forward. The last point I would make is that Strathroy-Caradoc is aware of, staff are aware of this, council is aware of this issue, and there's a housekeeping zoning bylaw that we're trying to move forward. We had it, a public information session back in the end of spring, early summer. That's coming back again, and it has additional policies, different policies, or provisions that remove that second, the requirement for it to be on the second story. But it still talks about a percentage that's less than the large. Why? Because the provincial policy statement speaks to this being subordinate to the main dwelling. So I'll leave it at that.
How about Steve?
So I'm gonna try and paraphrase it a little bit. So whether it's our zoning bylaws or the provincial policy statement envisions, or does not envision people building bigger homes to make the existing homes the secondary suite. It only imagines people staying in place where they are and then building a secondary suite that's smaller than the home that currently exists. So another way to put it would be that people with current wealth can embellish their own living arrangements. They can only build living arrangements that are subservient to their own.
Or if we have the original person in a log cabin, they can't build a house.
Right.
Through the chair, yeah, I don't believe that the intent is to do the original application, how it's like a reverse ARU situation where they're making the second home, the new one, bigger. I don't think that's the intent from the province. So generally the intent is you have your existing home and you're building the secondary suite, which is supposed to be subordinate to that existing primary dwelling.
Brian?
Thank you. I guess when you look at it from an urban standpoint, that is what you would like to see. You would like, if you have a 1,400 square foot house in town, you sure don't want someone building a 2,300 square foot house in town, because then you're throwing off when you move out here, even if they built a 2,000 square foot house compared to the other one, it wouldn't look out of place. You know, you're not building it right in the backyard of this other house, butting it up against the neighbors where they all have to look and see. There's more space for what we're kind of doing out in the rural, and a lot of times, you know, there is a little farmhouse because grandma and grandpa built 700 square feet and they jammed 9 children into it, and that was all they needed. So, you know, that would be very hard out in rural Ontario if you have to stay smaller than, you know, even 1,200 square feet's a fairly small house by today's standards. You know, even 1,500 is a modest home. So I understand the concept from an urban standpoint, looking at it that way. I just, you know, when we begin to stretch out a little farther, that's where I think maybe as part of the planning or moving or going forward, we have to somehow look at the rural side of things. So I guess are we looking for a motion here?
I have Randeep over here. You had a question yet? No? Okay. So yes. You have one more, Steve?
Yeah, I have a question for Tim, from a county perspective, if you can. The greenhouse portion of this property is more like an industrial application than a planted field. Does that in any way affect the policy perspective from the county or from our own bylaws as you interpret them? Because it isn't a wide open field that generates its revenue from crop, but is still an agricultural business.
Through the chair, and since it was directed to me, I'm sure Alyssa would have been able to answer this question as well. But one hat or another, county or otherwise, the planning documents look at greenhouses such as this as agricultural uses rather than industrial. There are some situations where it does start to move towards industrial, where you're doing some sort of processing of the products within the greenhouse complex, we'll call it. But in this particular case, this would be wholly agricultural. And so that piece, I would just, since I have the floor for just 1 second, if there was a possibility that a motion was in favor of this application and there was a need for any conditions or whatnot, we're certainly available to answer that. I'm not usually here, so I don't have that back and forth with the members here. So I just wanted to make sure that that was that you're aware that we're available to talk things out on that front. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So, Mike,
I'm gonna make a motion that we approve this application. I believe it complies with the provincial planning statement under section 5, A, B, C, D, E, and F. I further believe it satisfies the intent of section 45 of the Planning Act in consideration 1, 2, 3, and 4. And that it be accompanied with recommendations as provided by staff and accepted by the committee. So I guess a secondary conversation following, as Tim has just suggested.
okay. So then I need a seconder for that. Brian? All in favor? Oh,
Could you
we have
repeat
another-
just a comment? I'm gonna vote yes. I think, you know, regardless of planning statements and all, I just want us all to be aware we're going down a new road here and what that might mean in the future. And someday, 20 committee of adjustments from now, there might be an application here to sever this thing off, and that'll start a whole new discussion based on what the government of the day is thinking. So I'm gonna vote yes, but I just think we've opened a little can here, and I don't know where it's gonna go into the future, so.
That's the excitement.
Can I just ask one question then?
Sure.
Sorry, with the severance, we have our own policy statement there, right? Where it's 10 years, or is it you have to be older than 1999? Which, it was 10 years and then it was 1999, but I think with the appeal, we end up somewhere in the middle. Is that something like, I don't know which one we're running by, but we do have one in place that does do, you know, you can't sever it next year.
Yeah, concerning those policies in the official plan, those are only for the surplus farm dwelling severances. But yeah, you are correct that the county official plan currently says 10 years, and I believe the local municipal official plan is saying the January 1st, 1999, as of right now.
Okay. You, Mike?
Just an answer to that, I would direct, that was your question, correct? About the severability, or Frank did?
Well, I raised it, I mean, that may show up in the future sometime, but.
It could. If I could just direct I think the answer is on page 3 of 9 of the report, under section 5, the last line, between section 5F and section 6, there's just a simple statement that says lots with additional residential units may only be severed in accordance with policy 4.3.3.1 sub C, which this lot does not comply with. So in current PPS, it is not severable, which is good. Probably change in the future.
But just, that's exactly right, I mean.
Absolutely.
Who knows, yeah, anyway, that's enough.
Okay, all of that, I'm still asking for all in favor, and that does carry. Okay,
Do we have conditions?
that's what, we're gonna go back to list for conditions. Will that come back to our next meeting, or?
It could happen right now. We
Okay.
can give you a suggestion on a condition, and that way, members could adjust that condition. I think simply what you're wanting to consider here, and I'm gonna say something first and then just suggest the condition, sort of on the fly. I don't have it written down, I guess, is what I'm suggesting, is that there's been a lot of discussion about where the driveway would be going and alike, and the application does propose that driveway to sort of loop be connected to the existing driveway and loop around the existing greenhouses. There is a proposal for the location. None of those things are secured at this point. This would be, so it would make sense to have a condition that says that the development occur as per the plans on file with the Committee of Adjustment. Just to say, you know, there are approximate locations and alike on that, but it would just allow it so that it wouldn't be a situation, and I have no belief that they are planning on changing their location in any way, but the application right now, as it stands, could allow that secondary dwelling to be anywhere on the property.
Yeah.
And so you just want to turn your mind to that piece.
Okay, so.
We've already voted on that one.
Yeah.
I'll make another motion on this application then that the site plan as provided on page 9.9 of the application be the approved site plan to be followed by the applicant. Does that wording sound good when people heard me say it? I'll make that motion then. I think that brings page 9 onto this application.
Okay, but you need a seconder for that. Brian, all in favor? Okay, that carries. Okay, so then we are moving on to the next one, 5.4, which is an application for minor variance A7-2025 at 584 Albert Street in Strathroy. Jessica and Casey Vanderhyde, are they in the audience tonight? No, we don't think so. So Alyssa, back to you for your report.
Thank you, Chair. The minor variance application is seeking relief from section 4.23A of the Strathroy-Caradoc zoning bylaw to permit an exterior lot line setback of 4 meters, whereas the zoning bylaw requires a minimum of 6 meters for an attached private garage. The applicant is also seeking relief from section 5.35 of the zoning bylaw to permit a rear yard setback of 2.7 meters, whereas 8 meters is required. And the application will facilitate the construction of a 180 square meter addition to the existing dwelling, which includes an attached private garage. The subject property is located south of Albert Street on the southeast corner of Jane Street. The property is approximately 1,302 square meters in size, with 30.5 meters of frontage along Albert Street and 42.7 meters along Jane Street. The property contains a 91 square meter single detached dwelling and a carport structure. The applicant is proposing to construct a 180 square meter addition onto the dwelling, which includes, again, the attached garage fronting onto Jane Street. No comments were provided by the public prior to the development of this report. Provided agency comments include from RSM spatial separation OBC requirements, just for when it gets to building permit stage, if it gets there. And then I have reviewed this application against the 4 tests of the Planning Act, and as indicated in the report, it is staff's opinion that this application does meet the 4 tests. The existing driveway off of Albert Street will continue to provide sufficient parking space, as well as the newly constructed attached garage off of Jane Street. And the interior side yard will provide the required amenity space usually found in the rear yard. The overall character of the area should remain, and no negative impacts on neighbors are expected through these variances. And as such, I am recommending approval of minor variance application A7-2025. Thank you.
Excellent, thank you. Committee members, any questions or concerns on this one? Seeing none, I'm looking for a recommendation. Frank, supported by Dale. All in favor, and that carries. Nice to do a quick one. 5.5 is an application for a minor variance at 24 Front Street East. Owner is Derek Bazaire. It's Derek in the audience. There you are. Welcome to our meeting. Melissa, if I can go to you for your report.
Thank you, Chair. The The minor variance application before committee is seeking relief from section 4.61B of the Strathroy-Caradoc zoning bylaw to permit a dwelling unit on the main floor of a non-residential building, whereas the zoning bylaw states that dwelling units of a non-residential building are not to be located in a basement, cellar, or first story. The applicant is also seeking relief from section 10.43A to permit a dwelling unit on the main floor, whereas the bylaw states that it shall be located on a floor above the commercial use. Lastly, the applicant is also seeking relief from section 4.63B to permit a dwelling unit minimum floor area of 15.8 square meters, whereas the zoning bylaw requires the minimum floor area of a dwelling unit to be 40 square meters. The variance will facilitate the construction of a 15.8 square meter dwelling unit on the ground floor of a commercial building behind an existing commercial use in the same structure. The subject property is located south of Front Street East, east of Caradoc Street North. Property is approximately 246 square meters in size with 7 meters of frontage along Front Street East. The lands contain a commercial building with the commercial use on the main floor, which is a barber shop at the front of the structure, and an existing dwelling unit on the second floor. The property provides one parking space at the rear of the property, accessed through an informal driveway off of Colburn Street. No comments were provided by the public or agencies prior to the development of this report. Additional information about parking was raised after the public notices were already circulated. There's an informal parking lot on a neighboring property which seems to be accessed by many of these properties along Front Street through the access off of Colburn. There are no formal shared parking agreements between the residents. Due to the current property lines, which only contain the building and enough space for the one parking stall at the rear of the property, there's no additional room to kind of provide the requirements for an additional dwelling unit to have another parking space. The owner, I've been in discussions with the owner since then, and we've had some conversations about potentially adding a minor variance to request that no additional parking spaces be requested as part of their application. Just due to the timing of things, it wasn't able to be included with this report before it had to go to clerks. So as such, I'm recommending that the minor variance application A8-2025 be deferred to make these changes to the application to ensure that the parking considerations are part of the report. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Derek, do you have anything to add to that?
So the point of the application is just to allow, like, it's all staying, sorry. The Always Handsome Barbershop, that's who rents the front half of the unit, and it's all one commercial unit now, but all he wanted was the front 700 square feet. I said, you know, I'm looking to renovate the back, and he said it'd be great if my cousin could sublet part of that space and stay there. So it really is staying in the family. You know, they're Syrian refugees. They've got, you know, really great story for the community. So if we don't get permission to have a residential use for part of that unit, then, you know, we'll still renovate it and it'll be commercial. It'll all stay one unit, and that would get rid of this parking issue. But I think, like Alyssa said, you know, we'd be looking to add another minor variance to the application so that we could allow for him to have a place to live, move out of his aunt's basement, and come and move to Strathroy rather than commuting from London every day. And I asked them, you know, got my haircut last week, and I asked them, you know, where do you park? And they just figure it out. The upstairs tenants have access to the one spot that we have, and then Christian and his cousin just find places to park every day. So that's it.
Okay, thank you
Any
for sharing that.
questions?
Steve?
Yeah, so just looking at the plan, irregardless of thinking who's living there, because you know that's going to change at some point. If you were to have a place that didn't have a parking spot, to me this is kind of the optimum place to have it. not everybody owns a car. You're within walking distance to a grocery store and whatever other shopping might be needed. So if you were to have an apartment that didn't need a parking spot, to me, this is almost perfect.
Okay, thank you. Frank?
So in the interest of efficiency, if this is gonna come back a month from now with a recommendation for a second variance to not allow or not require a parking space, can we just, rather than defer it, deal with it all tonight and move it forward?
Through the chair, the reason that I would be deferring this is because the public notices did not include that as part of the variances requested, just to ensure that everyone is aware of what is being proposed at this, just to make sure that all 4 of them would be included is the reason for the deferral.
Yeah. Thank you for that.
That's fair, yeah.
Mike?
I'll make a motion to defer to next month's meeting.
Need a seconder for that? Steve? All in favor? And that is deferred. And the next one is an application for minor variance A9 2025, 77 Kittredge Ave East. Owner is Lee Cassell. Lee here in the audience tonight? No? Okay. Melissa, your report.
Thank you, Chair. So I just have some quick comments about this one. For the minor variance application A9 2025, the public notice for this application was circulated on April 11th of 2025. And then on April 3rd, the applicant had reached out to planning staff and to formally withdraw their application. They just had some discussions with the neighbors and there are some concerns there. So this was the ultimate result, is that they just wanted to withdraw the application and not worry about proposing the secondary suite as it was originally in the application. So as such, the planning recommendation report has not been included, and this memo has just been provided for information purposes because the public notice went out and people would have seen it. So as such, I'm just recommending that the minor variance application A9 2025 be received for information purposes only. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Brian?
I'll motion that we receive it for information.
And seconded by Mike. All in favor? That carries. Thank you. Any announcements, any inquiries by members? No, seeing none, our schedule of meetings is listed as there. And then I'm looking to adjourn. I need a motion to adjourn by Frank, supported by Randy. All in favor? And we are adjourned. Thank you.